Mr. Hetty?
I'm here.
Mr. Moylan?
Present.
Mrs. Chandler?
Here.
Chairman Day?
Here, if you would please stand and join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Number 3, I'll entertain a motion for the approval of minutes, October 13, 2014, September 29, 2014.
So moved.
I'll second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Moves us on to number 3, public comment and presentations. Mr. Jim O'Connor, our city manager, will come up, please.
I really don't have anything to present. Don Dexter is here on behalf of Monty Falls to sort of give an insight as to the Regional Planning Council. And I know Monty is putting together the information that he'll be passing on to the MPO as well.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Dexter?
Good afternoon. Don Dexter with Public Works. Last Thursday, I went to basically a staff meeting with the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council in Fort Pierce. And a lot of the information, just from looking through some minutes of meetings you have, you probably already know, but let me just run through some items that were discussed. The RIF loan, of course, is what prompted the whole EIS process. And if it wasn't for that, there wouldn't be any vehicle really for public input into these trains. And they felt this was our opportunity to seek mitigation for any impacts for the additional train traffic. The Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council really thought that this was going to be an Amtrak-like project, and you remember a few years ago there was talk about a station here in Vero Beach and other places. And so they were surprised when the high-speed rail came up and have been trying to get as much information as they can. They put together a timeline of when they would like to receive information from the various communities and counties. November 7th, they would like to have reports into the Regional Planning Council office. On the 14th of November, they would publish the report, and then on November 21st, they will actually have the TRCP meeting with all of the officials and report on the EIS comments. There were representatives there from St. Lucie County, Fort Pierce, and Vero Beach, myself. And most of the people there said that's not a realistic timeline. We have to get our comments together, get them approved by our boards before we can pass them on. So they said we'll get them to us as soon as we can. And the TCRPC will be really a voice for all of these communities to have their input, and since they are a group that reports to the state, it's a great vehicle for us to, in addition to sending our comments through the county, to send them through the Regional Planning Council. At this point, the Regional Planning Council has not taken a position on AAF, and that decision will be made at some future date. There were a few questions that were asked during the process or during our discussion. What if All Aboard Florida pulls out of the RIF loan process? And if that happens, then the EIS process basically is stopped. They don't have to follow through with that. Does the private activity bond financing have any vehicle for public input? And they don't know that yet. They're trying to find out. But at this point, they haven't seen where there's a vehicle for public input. Is the AAF a project of regional impact? And yes, it is. Well, how come the Regional Planning Council doesn't have any more input in it? And they said because the state laws and regulations that govern the Regional Planning Councils don't have any authority over what the railroad is doing. And I gave Tammy a printout that was put together by the Regional Planning Council. She was going to make copies for everyone. I don't know if she's had a chance. Okay, you do have a copy of that. And that's kind of a synopsis of the processes that are going on. One is the processes by the communities. The other is the process by the Coast Guard. And they have their own review process that's running parallel with this. Doesn't really affect us in Indian River County, but it does affect down in Martin, St. Lucie counties. The Federal Railroad Commission will review all of these DIEIS comments as they come in. People ask, well, do we know how they'll respond, how they'll incorporate them into the final draft? And they said, no, there's no way to predict that at this point. But the key is to be targeting items that are tangible and really safety-oriented. And so they looked at transportation issues as some of the projects. Something for us to think about, and we don't have all the detail yet because they've only published a 30% plan, but what will be the impact on traffic if they add a third track south of 16th Street? Which is talked about in the EIS. We want to identify if there's any drainage problems close to the railroad tracks. In the city itself, we don't know of any, but that would be something other communities may be looking at. The level of service at adjoining intersections, stacking of vehicles with the extra train traffic running through, those are things to be looked at or asked about through the EIS. And a question that came up was, All Aboard Florida has said they will pay for improvements to the new tracks and maintenance for 5 years, but if the existing tracks need to have improvements made at the same time, who is going to pay for those? Is All Aboard Florida picking that up, or is that going to be a burden for the local communities who have the crossings? How will the additional train traffic affect the GO line schedule? The GO line is not even listed in the DEIS as another form of transportation. And then what really are the details of the sealed corridor? Again, with only 30% plans, we don't have the actual drawings yet to show us exactly what that's going to be. And then another big one is how will the additional train traffic affect the police, fire, and EMS response times? Some other items that came up under land use issues. The Vero Beach Comp Plan is not listed in the EIS. They have, I think, Indian River County, St. Lucie County, but none of the cities who have comp plans were noted in the EIS. And as far as applying for a quiet zone, several communities thought they would like to do that, but it's pretty expensive to put the applications in. And they asked if the Regional Planning Council could submit a regional quiet zone applications for all of those entities that want to have a quiet zone. And they were going to look into that and see if it's possible. They did work with the MPO in Palm Beach County to make some applications down there. And then the other item that was talked about was the social economic issues. The Vero Man site as a historical site was not listed in the DEIS, so we need to make sure that is addressed. And then one of the comments was that we're getting all of the negative impact of having these additional train traffic, but we're getting none of the benefit for that. So that's kind of a synopsis of what was discussed with the Regional Planning Council. Again, this was just staff people. It wasn't the actual Planning Council members. If you have any questions, I'll try and answer them, but I'm kind of on the fringe of this and filling in for Monty. I know he's done a lot of research and is waiting for a response from the county's consultant on their review of the DEIS.
Commission questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Dexter, I have a question, please.
Oh, okay.
When they were discussing the situation, what organization is going to be reviewing the comments that come in? I know that a separate firm was hired to gather all the information. What firm is looking at the comments coming in?
The Federal Railroad Administration will be reviewing all of the comments.
But now, is their board going to be reviewing it, or are they going to be hiring a consulting firm to do it?
That I can't answer, and that I don't think they knew at that point. But the understanding that I had from the conversation was the Railroad Administration itself reviews the comments.
All right.
But I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, thank you very much. And the reason I asked
Don, hold on a second.
The reason I asked that question of Mr. Dexter is I am looking for that answer of who is actually going to be reviewing these comments. The actual Federal Rail Administration is just a number of a few people on a board. They hired a consulting firm that gathered much information. Much information is going to be coming in. Who looks at it? So that's an answer I had asked at one of the congressmen that I visited with here a few weeks ago, and they couldn't give me the answer. So I'm still waiting on that answer where I can say, okay, this is how it's going to be handled from the officials at the top. Mr. Hardy, go right ahead.
I have a question for Don, but with respect to your question, without, or at the risk, I guess, of sounding like a smart aleck, do you know of any governing agencies that actually look at things, or do most of them hire consultants? I know that the governing agencies that I've had the opportunity to deal with over the years, they all do the same thing. They all hire consultants. Don, one of the gentleman running for city council says that the Vero Man project has a series of things that they're going to make public at the end of November, just before the due date on this EIS. And a couple of things. Number one, I think that if you have something that gives credible evidence against the All Aboard Florida project, that you have an obligation to bring those facts out. Waiting to ambush them before the end of their EIS dates are up is, to my way of thinking, not the appropriate thing to do. But anyway, do you know, in your capacity as a city, do you know of anything at the Vero Man site that should be a serious concern with respect to All Aboard Florida going through there and the construction that they'll have to do on the tracks?
Not exactly. I know they did a series of borings in the area. I think the closest boring, as I recall, was a couple hundred feet away from the railroad right-of-way.
So that was out of...
It's right on the fringe of the study area that they did with the DEIS.
And do you know whether or not there's been any test borings inside the right-of-way?
I do not.
You don't know?
I don't know. From what I saw, they have not done any test borings in there, but whether that's 100% true, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Question.
Now go ahead.
Do you think they should?
Well, my understanding of the process is, and again, I'm kind of on the fringe of this, but you want to respond back to items that are deficient in the draft EIS. So a deficiency is that the Vero Man site, which is a significant site of historical importance, has not been specifically identified. So you want to say, you have not addressed this in the site, you need to address this site, and then let it go through the process. You don't necessarily need to request soil borings and things like this at this point, is my understanding. But I think the county's consultant, who has reviewed items like this before, once we bring that to their attention, and it may have been brought to their attention already, that's something they'll know how to respond to.
That they need to identify it in the EIS.
List it, identify it, and see if any impact is going to happen to the Vero Man site. I'm guessing they're going to have to put a new trestle across the canal at that point.
The designation of this site, does it include the right-of-way of the railroad? As it currently
From what I've seen, it runs right up to the border of the railroad
runs
track.
up to the railroad. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Ms. Chandler?
I believe that some of the indications from what they've learned from Mercyhurst also include the other side of the railroad, that it could be of historical significance. And I think when you respond to the EIS, you have to be very specific about the section, what part of the section. But I do believe you can suggest alternatives. They do name alternatives in the EIS, alternative A, B, and C. But I think that the community also may suggest alternatives at that time.
And that's important information, if someone has that, to get to staff so we can pass that along, that there is possible significance on both sides of the Railroad US 1 corridor. My understanding is, though, the site that has been identified at this point is all to the west, running right up to the border of the corridor. At least that's what's been fenced off and set aside.
Well, I'm not on their board, but what I understand is it includes a larger area.
Okay.
Any other questions from Mr. Dexter from the Commission? No further questions. I'll open it up now for the general public to come up if anyone wishes so. Yes, ma'am, come right up. State your name and address for the record.
New information or any information?
Good afternoon. Phyllis Fry, 275 Date Palm Road. I want to begin by thanking you. I want to thank you for all your months of sitting here, your hard work, your research, your questioning everything, and listening to everybody's comments from both sides of the aisle. And is this your last meeting today? No.
No, it's not.
Could I ask when is your last meeting?
We
Do you know?
sunset, and Ms. Vaughn, correct me if I'm incorrect, I think is December 6th?
It's actually the 1st of December.
1st of
Okay,
December. We
thank you.
sunset 1st of December unless the city council wishes to extend.
Okay, well, you've done a great job. We certainly do appreciate it. And I wanted to let you know that I attended the Fort Lauderdale EIS event yesterday, and I wanted to share some of my findings with you on how they address our concerns and maybe help the public understand what to expect at our Vero Beach event on November 5th. But I'd first like to return your attention to comments made at the previous commission meeting regarding plans for rail routes from Miami to Orlando. That was questioned for transporting produce and fruit. I didn't have the information at the time. So since that meeting, I learned that the governor's transportation budget presentation in June of this year revealed the proposed rail connection between Miami to Orlando through Clewiston, an expansion of rail route cutovers along Route 27 that will enable citrus and produce to be transported to Orlando as part of these rail extensions. So today I'm really here to just review some of the safety and logistics, because safety comes first. I know it's foremost on everyone's mind. Looking at the EIS, according to the DEIS, there are no threats to safety posed by the operation of All Aboard Florida because, quote, the project would have an overall beneficial effect on public health, safety, and security in the rail corridor, end quote. That statement is false for the following reasons. Statistics prove that All Aboard Florida's high-speed rail trains traveling at 110 miles per hour 32 times per day with closure rates of 220 miles per hour, shared with FEC freight trains through our most densely populated neighborhoods within the FEC corridor, are a threat to our health, safety, and security. Over the past 15 years, from 1999 to 2013, there have been 278 fatalities along the FEC corridor. Under All Aboard Florida's plan, the number of trains will increase by over 300%. The speed of the trains will more than double. Statistically, this increase will add 459 more people to FEC's corridor death toll. 29% of all rail deaths and accidents in America occur in Southeast Florida. 201 of these have occurred at random crossings, which the DOT calls epidemic, as they represent 74% of FEC railway deaths. Per year, this amounts to 18.1 deaths. By adding 32 All Aboard Florida trains per day traveling at 110 miles per hour along the corridor, 36.2 people per year are projected to be killed. If we limit our analysis to the Miami-Cocoa segment, those numbers per year are 14.7 and 29.4, respectively. These statistics prove that All Aboard Florida is a threat to public safety in the FEC corridor. Quite frankly, I'm rather dismayed at the lack of addressing the issue of safety in the AIS. It's dismissive and almost non-existent. According to Brian Gillerin, grade crossing safety engineer, high-speed trains do not give as much visual or audible warning of their approach. High-speed trains can be almost silent until right at the crossing. FRA's experience with energy-absorbing resistance quad gate systems has been generally unsuccessful. Why do nearly 30% of all rail accidents and death occur in Southeast Florida? Because we have the highest number of crossings, 349, more than anywhere else in the United States, and we have more at-grade crossings, 143, that will bifurcate our densely populated areas. When it comes to safety, the All Aboard Florida project is an experiment. As such, it has never been attempted anywhere else in the world, with no proven track record for operations of its proposed speeds and frequencies through an unprecedented number of crossings, combined with freight operations in our unique area. The projected calculations for increased deaths and accidents under these conditions is guaranteed. All Aboard Florida has no current operating experience. The EIS has not conducted a full detailed evaluation of the safety impact upon our communities. The EIS has not provided adequate safety analysis. The EIS cannot prove that All Aboard Florida operations will not experience significant increase in crossing and trespassing accidents and deaths. The Federal Railway Administration has safety equipment requirements and regulations for trains traveling at 111 miles per hour. That same is not true for trains traveling at 110 miles per hour. That distinction puts the public safety at heightened risk. The FRA simply recommends, but does not require, sealed corridors by regulation for trains operating at 110 miles per hour. The EIS is basing its safety impact study on the promise that All Aboard Florida will make safety improvements, but no details are offered in writing, as the FRA does not define those requirements. This loophole is one more point of negligence that will place the public safety at high risk. The FRA has zero experience using sealed corridors as a solution for safety with 110 mile per hour trains, and have never been proven through operating experience. These operations will never be safe as separated crossings. The FRA recommends the closing of crossings as a solution to safety. The question of All Aboard Florida operating passenger service only a few feet away from FEC trains that will contain explosive or other hazmat materials, especially of ethanol, which is more explosive than oil, through our densely populated areas is a high safety risk, and there are plans for the central parts of South Central Florida for transporting ethanol. None of this is addressed in the EIS. DOT reports show that over 350 rail collisions and derailments have occurred in the United States during the past 15 years. The FRA states, quote, "As train speeds increase, any condition that could result in train derailment becomes of greater concern. Any number of unforeseen events, such as motor vehicle brake failure, slick road surfaces, motorist errors, or other factors may result in a vehicle going through a lowered gate just prior to train arrival. At higher train speeds, the derailment potential is increased for a train collision with an errant motor vehicle in the crossing," end quote. There are, as I mentioned, 349 grade crossings along the route, and many of these include schools, playgrounds, homes, or businesses within 100 feet of the trains. The plan proposed to have All Aboard Florida pass each other at closing speeds of 220 miles per hour, and this is a threat to our safety. Sealed corridors will not provide adequate protection. A sealed corridor only funnels the cars to the crossing and adds quad gates. Some roads at crossings do not have room for the 100-foot median and the 9-foot walls. Vehicle detection systems are designed to prevent closure at the exit gate if a vehicle is on the track. They do not work 100% of the time. Quad gates are breachable. Most importantly, trains do not stop for vehicles on crossings. At the last Sebastian City Council meeting, cars were stranded for hours due to a crossing gate malfunction. I gave you a diagram to show you what happened yesterday in Sebastian. And at the last city council meeting in Sebastian, cars were stranded for hours due to a crossing gate malfunction. People ended up having to walk to the meeting. And just this week, This road accident in Sebastian yesterday caused a traffic jam with 3 cars abreast in long lines, as shown in the diagram, trapping 3 cars on the track for 15 to 20 minutes. If All Aboard Florida had been approaching at 110 miles per hour, the crossing warning time for vehicles approaching the crossing would allow gates to close only 20 seconds before a train arrives. For trains above 60 miles per hour, the horn is sounded 1/4 mile before the crossing. So a train traveling at 110 miles an hour, the horn will sound only 8 seconds before reaching the crossing. A vehicle trapped inside the gates would have only 8 seconds from the time the train warning horn is sounded until impact. An average freight train, 1.5 miles in length, traveling at 55 miles per hour, takes over 1 mile to stop once the brakes are applied. A passenger train, 800 feet long, with each rail car weighing over 1,000 pounds, traveling at 110 miles per hour, that's 160 feet per second, takes approximately 1 mile to stop if the brakes are applied. Again, trains do not stop for obstacles on the tracks. According to the FRA, the implementation of positive train control by 2015 is not feasible. This experimental equipment has not been proven in practice, and according to the FRA, is not economically justified. Its main purpose, in their own words, is not to protect the public, but to protect the train company's personnel and equipment. According to reports by the American Association of Railroads, failure points and failure modes have yet to be identified and corrected. FRA reports that PTC could actually make existing rail operations less efficient when malfunctioning. In conclusion, due to the absence of comparable operating experience, no credible scientific safety studies, hazard and risk analysis, or any substantive proof that All Aboard Florida operations will not increase the safety risk to the public, the operation of All Aboard Florida along the proposed route should not be approved by the FRA. One final comment. As I said, I attended the EIS at Fort Lauderdale yesterday. The All Aboard, and just to give you a description, the All Aboard Florida room at the convention center was filled with 30 to 50 easels with posters, with poster boards on each, and each one containing excerpts from the EIS study. Now, as we know, EIS has many areas that are deficient, but none of the information displayed there addressed the negative impacts to our communities. The only mention of safety was a clock that showed the lowering of gates 20 seconds prior to the train's arrival at the gate, which wasn't a real confidence builder for me. I met Mr. Winkle with the FRA and pointed out that there was no information about safety displayed. He stated that they wanted to keep that subject separate from environmental concerns at these events. So if you're going there to find anything out about what safety measures they're taking, you won't get an answer. That statement pretty much summed it up. As Mr. Reininger said in this chamber when this process first started, he said, as far as the EAIS goes, your community has no concerns. I encourage everyone to attend the EIS event on November 5th or tomorrow. I'll be in Stewart. It starts at 3:30, but don't expect to receive answers. These agents are well trained and I'm sure well paid to give you the dismissive answers in legal speak. You can fill out your comment cards there or mail them in. I would suggest do your homework and provide the facts that do concern you, because we do have some very serious concerns. I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hetty, go right ahead.
Yeah, Phyllis, question. During your presentation, one of the things you said is that the high-speed trains are almost silent until they get to the crossing. Mm-hmm. Do you attribute that to the passenger trains? They have less vibration and therefore less noise, or?
Not an engineer, Brian. I'm not an engineer, of course, but due to the lighter construction of those trains, you know, these alloys that they use are not like the old heavy, clunky freight trains, and so they would be quieter in that regard, and as they will as. But I'm not an engineer, and someone would certainly have a better answer than that. Sorry, I can't.
I know that
but that was a quote from the FRA.
I know the trains that came down near my New York home, the freight trains that came by, you definitely could hear them.
Sure.
But as you point out, the passenger, particularly ones that had few cars, they were silent to you till they got right on you.
Silent and deadly, I would say.
Yeah, well, a friend of mine found out his family found out just how deadly they could be
sorry to
because
hear
they
that.
were silent. But the other thing, trains don't stop for cars on the tracks. It seems to me that if one of these trains were heading up the track and they saw a car, that the first thing they would do would be apply the brakes.
Sure, but
Now, they might not be able to stop in time, but to make it sound like they're just going to push you to the side and keep on going, I don't think is an accurate portrayal.
actually, if you go to YouTube and look at the pictures of the train collisions, this is exactly what happens. They keep plowing through because they might eventually come to a stop much further down the track after the calamity. But you will not see a video where a train comes to a stop so that because a car or anything else there's an incursion there. I spoke with the engineer yesterday, and he did the calculations, and it came out to be 4,800 feet that these trains would need to stop.
I guess the reason for my question, Phyllis, was that I have been on trains in Alaska where the front of the train was essentially a plow, and they didn't stop for things. And usually it was a wildlife, but they kind of plowed through, and I just didn't want that kind of an image about
I don't
these.
either.
Yeah.
That's the only one I have right now, though. So, but we can address the the math on that and talk to the engineers further to get a.
Oh, yeah, I know. I understand.
Idea.
If you see a train, you're the engineer, and you see a car on the tracks and apply the brakes. Unless you saw it a mile ahead of time, you're in trouble.
Well,
Thank you.
let's just hope it doesn't happen. Thank you again.
Go right ahead,
Phyllis.
Ms. Chandler.
Phyllis,
Ma'am.
just a minute.
Sure.
Appreciate
How are
you
you?
coming in time after time, and certainly you've done a lot of homework and looked at a lot of research. I'm happy to hear that you're going to a lot of the meetings. And when you're going to those meetings, I know that looking at how FRA would like for responses and comments to be made, like when you're here before us, they're kind of general. You're not making reference to specific sections of the EIS. Are you doing, I'm just curious, are you doing that? I hope
Yes.
you're doing that.
Oh, yes. Yes.
the
We have
meetings.
a great team that is approaching the EIS at each section on each issue, which I have on the copy that I gave is Section 5. All this that I addressed today came under Section 5.
Okay, just wanted to ask that
and that's
question.
a good point
If
to
you're-
bring out because people really do need to be specific.
People need to know that if they're going to those meetings, they need to be specific about the section. It can't be just a personal opinion. It has
That's
to be
right.
backed by some data, whatever it
point.
is your comment is. So
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear that.
Hope
Great.
they will. Hope everybody will come
Great.
on November 5th.
And did you get the impression, that all the boards and all the stations will be identical the whole way through, even though there are different issues up and down the coast?
I
Will
did.
all those
yeah, I think it's a
stations be
generic.
identical?
Okay. They tried to cover. They tried to cover each and every interest they had. Yesterday they were focused hugely on the marine aspects of that, with all the diagrams, and they had videos showing graphics of boats going through and the timings of the bridges, because the bridges are a big issue down there. Not too many people were interested in our crossing issues and so forth, but
That's why I was thinking maybe
Yeah.
it would be different as they move up the coast, maybe because you would expect in that area, maritime is going to be a big issue for them.
I believe you're
But
right.
Perhaps when they get here, it might be something else.
I believe you're right. Yeah,
Okay.
so we'll be ready.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Anyone else from the general public like to address the commission? Yes, sir, come right up. Please state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Bob Webster, 2881 St. Bart's Square, Vero Beach. I've sent you something by email, which you may have had time to look at, but I want to address something that hasn't been addressed. But before I do that, I'm going to talk about, will Vero Beach be better off with or without All Aboard Florida? I don't know that too many people stop and think of it in those terms. But before I start, if you wanted to make a jigsaw puzzle and you set out to do that and selectively took a bunch of pieces out you just didn't want to put into it and then found some pieces from some other puzzle and decided to force them in there, what you're going to wind up with is a picture that isn't what it was supposed to be. And quite honestly, I think that's my assessment of what many of the objections come to, because they take selective information in an environment that isn't realistic to create scare scenarios. So let's talk about this. I feel that this proposal has been the target of a lot of negative and misrepresentation ever since it was first announced. So if there is no, let's just think about what's going to happen if there is no All Aboard Florida. Things remain the way they are, except for the following changes, and these changes will come. The FEC will run more freight train. They have in the past, they will in the future. When the economic recovery becomes robust, we could have, they anticipate another 10 trains a day from Florida East Coast. That's going to mean more horns, more vibration, more grade crossing closures, more closure time, and the consequences of those things to the people of the community. We know Florida is attracting more and more people as residents, vacationers, and tourists every year. That's going to continue. There's going to be impact on highway capacity. I-95 was built, then it's been increased. We're just going through an increase from 4 to 6 lanes. That's in anticipation of this future traffic. But how many times can we continue to widen lanes, and at whose cost? That's a public cost. So let's consider what the benefits All Aboard Florida might bring to Vero Beach. First, improved crossing safety. And by the way, positive train control is not some scheme cooked up to create the illusion of importance and safety considerations. It's a very robust technical system that's mandated by the Federal Railroad Administration. The date of mandate has moved around a little bit, but I believe it's sometime in 2015, although I'm not positive. It may be beyond that. I do know that Metrolink, which is a Southern California light rail system, higher speed, will use positive train control this year. They started their work on this in 2008. There was a terrible accident. And now they're having installation test runs, and it will be operational under positive train control. And they work with BNSF, Burlington Northern Santa Fe. That's ongoing. Amtrak will go to it. CSX will go to it. Norfolk Southern will go to it. Florida East Coast will eventually go to it. They'll all go to it. So this is not some fly-by-night idea. And it's a GPS-based system. It uses rail monitoring technology, and it allows much better control over where trains are and if there's a potential problem to make accommodations and stop or slow those trains if necessary. The rail monitoring will help in terms of collision avoidance. That's the whole purpose of it. So that together with sealed corridor guidance, and it's true, it's guidance. You don't know what it is for every single crossing, but common sense tells you if you do the things that sealed corridor requires, and All Aboard Florida has said they will do those things, then you will have crossings that are far more secure. And between positive train control and the sealed corridors, your chances of a collision become virtually nil. Far, far safer than what you have today. So we have an improvement in safety, one benefit. Noise abatement. According to the Federal Railroad Administration, again, the sound of a horn is 100 times louder than the sound of a freight train moving 50 miles an hour. So if you silence the horns, you've taken care of a lot of the noise problems. Sealed corridor requirements make the upgrades at All Aboard Florida's costs For the vast number of crossings, all that's necessary are a couple of signs warning the public that the horns aren't going to sound, and a request to the Federal Railway Administration. It's not a huge financial burden. Reduce variations. All Aboard Florida is going to realign all the track and recalibrate it to tighter tolerances for rail separation. That means you won't have that side-to-side squealing and vibration caused by rail that's slightly out of tolerance to the separation of the wheels on the cars, the rolling stock. They're going to improve and tighten that all up. Why? They want a smoother ride for the faster the trains. But that's going to benefit the freights, so you'll have less vibration. You'll have less noise from that squealing. The crossing times will actually, in terms of the impact on Florida East Coast, if you have faster trains, which you will be allowed to run faster freight trains, up to, I believe, 70 miles an hour, that can considerably shorten the closure time for gates at crossings. So there's a potential benefit. The additional closing time for the All Aboard Florida trains is minimal. And there's if you came to a crossing at a time when it was going to be impacted by a All Aboard Florida train, you would have, on the average, a 24-second wait before the gates went up again. It might be as many as 48 seconds. So you have less than a 3% chance during the day of encountering an All Aboard Florida train. So this is minimal, particularly compared with things like Sunrail now up in the north and Tri-Rail in the south. There haven't been horror stories about problems to public safety because of all those trains. And continuous train movements. There will not be times, unless the world isn't perfect, things will happen. But in the normal course of operations, because All Aboard Florida is double tracking the entire corridor north of Palm Beach to Cocoa, and triple tracking in a few places where there are going to be no grade crossings at the same time. They're not going to triple cross where there's a road crossing, or triple track where there's a road crossing. They will be allowed to operate Florida East Coast as well as All Aboard Florida at speed continuously. That because of the positive train control, which allows them real-time notification of where every single train is. So that's an improvement because you're not going to have trains sitting around waiting for other trains to pass, thereby closing roads. You're not going to have that situation under normal operations. Improved transportation opportunities for the people of Vero Beach. If we had a transit station here, there's nothing to prohibit a future station at Vero Beach, except the people saying, we don't want one here. I don't think the railroad would put one in then. But think of the advantages. How many people don't drive to Miami or Fort Lauderdale to a sporting or cultural or an entertainment event because they don't want to deal with the traffic? Same thing going to Orlando. A lot of people, you have to pay somebody to drive you to Orlando or pay the parking fees if you're going on an air trip. It's an opportunity to have, it gives people, the community, another option. And finally, there's the savings in deferred road construction. Even no matter what numbers of people this system would take off the highways, it's going to reduce the pressure for more lanes on the highways at greater public cost and more congested highways. So, and I would urge you, don't get drawn into arguments that are based on Florida East Coast operations as a reason not to support or at least be neutral about All Aboard Florida, because Florida East Coast is going to operate anyway. The question is, what's the differences in the way it's going to operate without All Aboard Florida and the way it's going to operate with All Aboard Florida? And I believe if you put yourself in the future and look back, things would be a lot better with All Aboard Florida than if you didn't have it. Okay? I think the people would say, do we really want to miss these opportunities for benefits? Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, sir. Any questions from the commission, Mr.
Bob,
Petty?
I have questions.
Mr.
Yes,
Webster.
okay.
Yes.
You want to start,
You
Mr. Pacelli?
The last time you were here, sir, you quoted the late Senator Daniel Moynihan of New York, who once observed, everyone is entitled to their own opinions, but not their own facts.
That's correct.
Is it not true at this time you are giving your opinion, not facts?
I am giving you my considered opinion based on the facts,
And how did you arrive at those facts?
by doing my research.
Where?
Well, I can do a lot of it online or by telephone or by email,
Thank you.
contacting the people
Okay.
who, and that raises a point. There were some questions here, gee, we want to know from, and they're good questions, who's going to review this? Well, my only question is, have you asked the Federal Railroad Administration? Because they ought to be able to give you a straight answer to that. I mean, I wouldn't waste my time with the congressman, not that the congressman can't do it too, but I'd go right to the source.
And I don't mean to interrupt you, Mr. Petticelli, but to answer your question right quick, I am right now doing that research, and
Good.
so far
Good.
they have not been able to answer that question. And I would like a straightforward answer.
Right.
And that's where you get into
I appreciate.
as far as going forward, and I will get a straight answer. Somebody has to review it. Please just tell me who.
Believe me. Right. And by the way, one more thing. If anybody has facts, demonstrable facts, that can suggest that I'm just wielding opinions up here, I'll be happy to consider them. I don't choose to be wrong about anything.
Okay.
I'm not saying I'm the world's greatest authority or that I'm necessarily right, but I've asked for people to come forward, and I haven't heard anything from anybody.
Okay. I have another question. At reduced crossing closure times, that may be true, but isn't it also true that there's going to be more trains and longer trains on these tracks?
Are you talking about freight trains?
I'm talking about just the fact that we're going to have the high-speed rail 32 times a day. Isn't that more? And I understand from my readings that the freight trains may be increased from 9,000 plus feet to 14,000 plus feet, which will certainly slow things down. And they should be increased, as you point out, when the port is widened and the economy gets better. So doesn't that impact? But that doesn't say it in here.
Well, no, it does, in a sense. I tried to address that. Well, I'm trying to be brief, too.
Okay.
The crossing times for freights are going to be shorter, no matter how long they are, if you have higher speeds. That's the point to get. I'm saying, with all aboard Florida, without all aboard Florida, the freight's going to do what the freight's going to do. Nobody's going to stop that. So do you want it through town faster and shorter closure times? And do you want less vibration? And do you want the horns stopped? Or do you want to hear the horns? Do you want the vibration? Do you want them moving through town slower? That's the question. What's the impact of all aboard Florida on the freight changes in the future?
I think that's one half of the coin. The other half of the coin is safety. And
Safety for...
I know you tried to be brief, but right now we have 0 high-speed trains. We are going to be having 32, which will mean increased closure time. That's a fact. We also know, if I'm correct, what I've read or been told, we're going to have the freight trains increase from 9,000 plus feet to 2.65 miles of train, if my information is correct.
If your information is
Which
correct.
will slow things down. And as you point out, when the port becomes available, there will be more trains with more freight. So, yes, you are correct on your half of the nickel. But on the other half of the nickel, I believe I am correct.
What's the other half of the nickel?
The fact that there's going to be more.
More what? Freight?
More trains, more freight, more high speed.
Let's not confuse apples with oranges. If you're going to have higher speed operations for freight trains, if you make the freight trains longer, you're going to save even more time by having them operate at higher speeds. That time, if they don't change their length and they just go to 70 miles an hour, they will save 2/3 of the time that all the new all-aboard Florida trains are going to gobble up. Now, if you make those trains longer, you could wind up with a total gate closure times of lower than they are in the absence of all-aboard Florida for the combined two of them.
That's one side of the coin.
Well, that's the way the numbers play out.
Well, let's assume, for argument's sake, that right now there are 10 freight trains at 9,000 plus feet. Let's say a year from now there are the same number, but it's a longer train. Therefore, the time will be greater at these crossings.
Right, unless you have higher speed movement, in which case they may not be.
Mr. Webster,
That's the whole point I was trying to make.
Mr. Webster, let me maybe summarize what I believe your argument is. You're suggesting that independent of whether All Aboard Florida comes through or not, freight trains are going to come through.
Absolutely.
And independent of All Aboard Florida, freight trains are going to get longer.
Well, I didn't say that, but that's a reasonable assumption. I think that's even in the EIS.
And in fact, I think there's a belief that there also might be more frequent of freight trains.
That's entirely possible and certainly to be expected.
Your suggestion is that even accounting for the possible 32 crossings with the track improvements, that the freight trains will be able to transverse through the city at a faster rate due to the improvements as a result of All Aboard Florida.
Right, and that will reduce their crossing gate closure time, and it depending on how long those are and how many of them there are, it may be enough to overtake the additional time or offset all the time that the faster, short All Aboard Florida trains would take. And it's something that really needs to be considered. I mean, you don't want to create a false picture of the future by saying, one thing that doesn't take all the information into consideration. And I want to say one more thing. We're talking about the freight movements. The way most of Florida East Coast business is due to transfer of goods from the Jacksonville area exchange from CSX and Norfolk Southern down to the South Florida. I mean, that's most of their service. 70% of their trains, according to their people, come back empty. Okay, now, what's the impact of opening the canal to wider ships? Well, those wider ships right now can't go through the canal, so they're docking on the West Coast, and they're being hauled. That freight's being hauled across the country to Jacksonville and coming down on the Florida East Coast. You bring those wider ships through the Panama Canal, that freight isn't going to come the same route. So you're going to have decreased southbound on the Florida East Coast and increased northbound, which is really good for Florida East Coast because it balances their load, which is a much more efficient way of running a railroad. So you have to consider that. Now, it's true. Some things may be offloaded at Miami and run north to other parts of the East Coast. So we don't really know what the full mix is. But a lot of that may stay on ship and go northbound to ports to the north.
Ms. Chandler has a question.
I believe it's in Section 4 or 5. There's a table that shows the number of passenger trains, the number of freight trains by 2016, and indicates clearly that there will be at least 20 freight in addition to the 32. And then at some point, I believe, and I can't remember what section it's in, or maybe Mr. Roberts told us that freight is going to increase 3% a year over time. So you said something about gate impact if they go faster being minimal, and that's true for each individual train. But I think the point that Frank was making is if you then have 52 a day, that minimal impact isn't quite so minimal anymore. And I guess the other comment I would have for you, in some of your comments, it did not sound like you had read the EIS. I have a copy of it at the chamber office. I'll be finished with it probably by the end of next week if you'd like to come in, and I'll give you a room and you can take a look at it.
I have the copy.
Didn't appear that you had read some of it.
Well, I don't know which parts you're talking about, but
parts that were your opinion instead of the facts.
Well, excuse me, what can you point them out?
Well, I was just pointing out some of those.
I don't think so.
In your comments where you were saying...
My point is that the more trains you have, if they're underrun...
I get that.
Well, isn't it the total...
Each individual train is going to be a shorter time.
So the cumulative time of gate closure
effect
is not going to be substantially different from what it is today.
I guess it depends on your Webster definition of minimal. Thank you.
Well...
one of the things that I keep hearing is the increase in the freight, and All Aboard Florida's proposal upgrades the tracks and double tracks and increases, if you will, the capacity. But increasing capacity doesn't increase demand, and what drives increased freight is increased demand. And if what I'm hearing is accurate, that half of the trains that return from Miami return empty, then it seems to me that the port in Miami being able now to access different larger ships, the only change in terms of trains will be that instead of coming back empty, they'll come back full. But the increase in capacity doesn't increase the demand for consumer products. The 2.6 miles long, those trains that we, and I've heard these numbers before, and I think that approaches the Guinness Book of World Records, which is a train that went across central Australia, and I think they ran it more specifically to make a Guinness Book of World Records. Trains just don't happen that long because there isn't the demand. The stops that you talk about, it seems to me, and I've heard from several people that said they would like a stop here in Vero Beach. If you look at the model of All Aboard Florida, they're stopping at Miami International Airport. They're stopping at Fort Lauderdale International Airport. They're stopping at West Palm Beach International Airport and Orlando International Airport. If they were going to add an additional stop, it seems to me that the common sense location for that would be Melbourne, not Vero Beach, because they have the international airport and they get the double bang for the buck like they do in the other locations. And then one other thing, the quiet zones, you said they're not huge financial obligations, not huge financial burdens.
To acquire.
I can't, pardon?
To acquire it.
Yeah. I can't tell you exactly where because Tammy has been terrible to this committee and she has sent, I think it's upwards of 7 feet of documents now. Are we over 7 feet now? Or?
Could be.
Yeah. And anyway, so I can't tell you with any degree of certainty where I saw it, but I can tell you with absolute certainty that I remember reading where one town, the cost exceeded $1 million for those quiet zones, but
they had to make the improvements.
Right. It's also my understanding that if we opt for the quiet zones, and I'm not suggesting we do that, but if we did, the construction cost, the initial cost, are going to be borne by All Aboard Florida. However, we're going to get stuck with maintenance for the rest of our lives.
Well, that's true. And you have a choice. Do you want the crossing or don't you? The crossings are there at public benefit. If the public doesn't want to pay for them, then abandon them. You can always do that.
May I ask another question?
Yes, sir.
Do you believe, your opinion, that the city should pay for these improvements or All Aboard Florida?
Which improvements?
Quiet zones, crossing gates, whatever. Should the local residents have to foot the bill instead of All Aboard Florida, in your opinion?
Well, as a matter of fact, it is normally the responsibility of the community to make improvements to their road cross. You have to look at it this way. Let's suppose you owned a piece of property, and behind you, you had somebody else who had a landlocked piece of property. You might have a 3-acre, 5-acre ranch somewhere. Somebody else has 5 acres behind you. They come to you and they say, I'd like to build back this, a beautiful area. You say, yeah, I'd like to have you for a neighbor. But I need a way to get to the road. Do you mind if I have a right-of-way to cross your land? He says, no. Would it be reasonable? You can go ahead and have the right-of-way. I'll grant it to you. Would it be reasonable for the fellow who wants to build a house behind him to say, I want you to build my roadway, and I want you to maintain it?
You're asking me the question?
That's the same question you just asked me.
If I was going to do that fella a favor, yeah, you're going to build it and maintain it. I do not believe in my heart that the residents and taxpayers of this city should pay 1 penny towards the upgrades or maintenance. That's my opinion.
Well, but The crossing exists to serve the public, not the railroad. The railroad didn't put those crossings in to their benefit. The reason they exist is so that the public can travel. They exist for the public good. Now, does the public have the maturity and the desire to pay for that? Or do they expect the railroad to pay for their convenience?
Well,
That's the question.
If you ask me if I went into the ballot box, the answer would be no.
Well, fine, but I'm talking about reasonableness and being, having standards principles that you wouldn't expect to pay for your neighbor's driveway, and you wouldn't expect to pay for it. And if EPA came along and said we needed new drainage next to it, you would expect to be paying for that too. That's up to him.
But who benefits in the end if this train does not stop in Vero Beach? Who benefits?
Well, if it doesn't stop in Vero Beach, well, I think all the benefits I outlined, other than that one, would apply.
Well, that is your opinion, correct?
Well, reasonable people will look at this.
Well, I'm a reasonable person, and I come up with a distinctly opposite opinion.
Well, that's interesting. I wonder what you base it on. I mean, really?
Well, I'm basing it upon the facts that I see that you have not fully addressed.
Really?
Correct.
Which fact about positive train control and sealed corridors don't make the crossing safer?
I disagree, and I'm not going to take your time and my time. I'm just telling you, you make an excellent presentation. I disagree with your opinions and some of your facts. Not all of them, some of them.
Well, I would love for you to send me by email, you have it, what facts you believe that I'm wrong with, and I'll be happy to work that out with you. And you'll either correct me or I'll correct you. We'll come to some other agreement. I mean, and anybody. I mean, really. I'm not an unreasonable person. I just want to get to the truth.
And I gather that very much. Actually, it takes a lot of time to actually answer.
And I really wish I hadn't gotten involved with this, but I have.
And I really do appreciate you coming in. Anybody else, I'm okay if you want to go.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else from the general public? All right, with that being said, I'll close this part of the meeting. A couple comments on what we heard today so far, and these are concerns that have come to my ears throughout our community, both our city friends, our county friends, and also in other areas that surround us. It was brought up here that the high-speed train is going to be traveling next to freight. All right, now with that being said, you're going to have possibly, we're actually going to have 2 tracks out there. Possibly they could lay in a 3rd track. We were told a few meetings ago by the president of All Aboard Florida, there's enough room out there for 7 tracks. Now here's some concerns here. With your high-speed train running out on this track, they've told us it will go up to 110 miles an hour through our community. If you have the freight traveling alongside that, and let's say it's fairly close, if you have an accident, and God forbid, what are you going to do about that? All right, now in some of my research, I'm finding out that we're going to have to be set up as a community to handle these type of accidents. Your freight trains carry all kinds of things on there. Everybody knows that. So how are we going to deal with it as a community if there's an event? There's going to be regulations coming down the pike where communities are going to have to be set up to handle these type of situations if, indeed, a high-speed rail does go through. Now, with that being said, that is more dollars that will have to come out of our taxes to fund the emergency vehicles. This is one of the things I'm hoping our emergency manager director is going to look at, because I have, again, a whole list of questions concerning this. Back to freight. All right, it was stated that the freight would go faster, so your railroad crossings would be closed less time. All right, now, if you go back and look at some of our meetings when they talked about the cars that carry freight, a lot of those cars, their wheels are not truly round, and they're not really built for high speeds. And when you're carrying a heavy load like rocks or sand, I think the company that owns them, they're going to be very careful as they come through. Now, if they happen to really beef up the speed and they don't do the repairs on the equipment, then what are we going to do? So that's something you have to think about, because the questions have come up throughout this community. We have a playground here in the city of Vero Beach that's very close to the tracks. Again, people are asking, okay, trains coming through, we understand, up to 110 miles an hour, increased freight. What happens if that thing falls off the tracks? And the general public wants answers. Also, it was brought up here about, okay, with the crossings, if you don't want cars going over the crossings, well, as a community, shut them down, because that's what you want as a community. Folks are starting to say, okay, well, you're impacting us. This is a very large company coming through our area. When you do the research on who owns them, it's a lot of money involved here. What about us? Business owners out throughout this community have said, well, we own and operate a business. We have to follow certain codes and regulations. And if we're making a severe impact on the general public, well, they're going to put more rules and regulations in place. So I think our community as a whole, from what's been coming to my ears, they know this is going to make an impact. And now they're asking, okay, how much and how much are we going to have to pay? Ms. Chandler brought up some very good points that I want to just revisit. The DEIS study for the neighborhood groups that are making comments, you are going to have to pick out the sections, and you are going to have to, when you address and you have concerns, is actually funnel that to the right section. Because as this goes through, you can say, oh, I don't like this. That's okay. That just goes over in the I don't like pile. Or, hey, I like this. That goes in that pile. You have to identify the section that you're making reference to. That's extremely important with this situation. The federal government has laid out the process, and we must follow the process whether we like it or not. And with that being said, I'm going to move right into our next item, number 4. Discuss the county resolution, and for the general public to hear what we're I want to have you hear what we're looking at. I'm going to have Ms. Vach read this for you all, then we'll make our comments on it. You can use mine.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Vero Beach, Indian River County, Florida, opposing All Aboard Florida. Whereas All Aboard Florida Operations, LLC, All Aboard Florida, a subsidiary of Florida East Coast Industries, is proposing to provide a high-speed passenger rail service 32 times, 16 round trips per day between Miami and Orlando that will run through populated areas of Indian River County, including the City of Vero Beach, the City of Sebastian, and the communities of Gifford, Roseland, Wabasso, and Winter Beach without stopping or serving these areas. And whereas the current railroad tracks owned by Florida East Coast Railway are designed for trains that operate at speeds from 40 miles per hour to 60 miles per hour. And whereas All Aboard Florida proposes to operate a high-speed passenger train service which will travel at speeds up to 110 miles per hour through most parts of Indian River County, Florida. And whereas populated communities within Indian River County, including the City of Vero Beach, Florida, which are accustomed to and grew up with slower-moving trains, are wholly inappropriate for the proposed high-speed passenger rail project. And whereas, at first, All Aboard Florida touted the high-speed passenger rail project as being a private company providing a private service by using solely private resources, and whereas it is now understood that All Aboard Florida intends to fund a significant portion of the proposed high-speed passenger rail project through a Railroad Rehabilitation and Improvement Financing, RRIF program, loan of approximately $1.6 billion that is administered by the Federal Rail Administration, an agency of the United States federal government. And whereas if All Aboard Florida secures the amount that has been requested in its RRIF loan application, it will be the largest RIF loan awarded by the federal government to date. And whereas in June of 2014, All Aboard Florida sold $405 million in high-risk bonds with a hefty 12% interest rate to assist in its efforts to build the proposed high-speed passenger rail project. And whereas, if All Aboard Florida secures the amount that it has requested in its RIF loan application, it intends to use a portion of the RIF loan to repay the $405 million in high-risk bonds. And whereas, it is now also understood that in addition to the federal assistance, the state of Florida has pledged approximately $215 million for a new rail station at the Orlando International Airport, which will benefit All Aboard Florida and other transit systems. And, do you want me to continue? This is a resolution number 2014. Whereas FECR has license agreements with local governments for most, if not all, of the railroad crossings along FECR's Corridor 32, of which are within Indian River County. And Whereas, due to the language in the license agreement, local governments such as the City of Vero Beach, Indian River County, Florida, will bear both the maintenance cost of upgrading the railroad crossings to allow All Aboard Florida to operate a high-speed passenger rail service and the cost of installing and maintaining any additional equipment to implement one or more quiet zones. And whereas, instead of being a high-speed passenger rail service provided by a private company using solely private resources, it is now clear that a significant portion of the financial burden of the proposed passenger rail project will be borne by the taxpayers through assistance from the federal, state, and local governments. And whereas it has been determined that this project has not shown an economic benefit and will cause a financial burden in the form of liability, maintenance, and other costs to the residents and taxpayers of the City of Vero Beach. And whereas, according to draft environmental impact statement issued by the Federal Railroad Administration, currently operates up to 16 freight trains per weekday and 11 freight trains per weekday. And by 2016, it expects to be operating up to 26 freight trains per weekday and up to 17 freight trains per weekend day, with an anticipated annual increase of 3%. And whereas the upgraded railroad crossing will allow FECR to operate its freight service at speeds of up to 70 miles per hour through populated areas of Indian River County, including the City of Vero Beach, the City of Sebastian, and the communities of Gifford, Roseland, Wabasso, and Winter Beach. And whereas additional grade crossing closures and blockages may hinder the emergency service providers and equipment from being able to make timely responses to emergency calls or transport medical patients located on either side of the FEC Railroad corridor. And whereas there may be significant risks posed to public safety response times and land mobility. And whereas there will be no future stops within the City of Vero Beach, Indian River County, Florida, by All Aboard Florida, unless the plans are first approved by the Central Florida Expressway Authority, which is comprised of elected officials representing the interests of Central Florida and unelected individuals appointed by the governor and the Central Florida Express Authority Bond Council. And whereas the first priority of the City Council of the City of Vero Beach, Indian River County, Florida, is the health, safety, and general welfare of the residents and visitors of the City of Vero Beach. And whereas All Aboard Florida's proposed high-speed passenger rail service will increase railroad traffic, railroad noise, and railroad vibrations within the City of Vero Beach, Indian River County, Florida, thereby creating a genuine detriment and threat to the health, safety, and general welfare of the residents and visitors of the City of Vero Beach, Indian River County, Florida, as well as harm to the City of Vero Beach's, Indian River County, Florida, natural, environmental, and historical resources. And whereas representatives of All Aboard Florida have continuously misled our community as to the true nature of the project, the extent of the support of the federal government subsidy, the significant benefit to the freight business, and the real detrimental impacts to the health, safety, and general welfare to the communities of the City of Vero Beach, Indian River County, Florida, and the entire Treasure Coast. And Resolution Number 2014. Whereas it has now become necessary for the City Council of the City of Vero Beach, Indian River County, Florida, to say in clear terms that it opposes All Aboard Florida's efforts to force this high-speed passenger rail project through the City of Vero Beach, Indian River County, while having the cost of the project borne by the taxpayers. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Vero Beach, Indian River County, Florida, that Section 1, the above whereas clauses are true and correct and hereby adopted as findings of the City Council of the City of Vero Beach, Indian River County, Florida. Section 2, the City Council of the City of Vero Beach, Indian River County, Florida, opposes All Aboard Florida. Section 3, a certified copy of this resolution shall be provided to the Governor, Rick Scott, Florida State Senators Thad Altman and Joe Negron, and Florida State Representatives Debbie Mayfield and Gail Harrell, the Federal Railroad Administration, United States Senators Marco Rubio and Bill Nelson, United States Representatives Bill Posey and Patrick Murphy, and FDOT Secretary Aneth Prasad.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. At our last meeting. It was a joint meeting with the City Council, and they wanted to receive input from our commission to work on this draft resolution. So I looked at a number of resolutions that were done by other counties with similar concerns of ours, and I went through there, put some language in. It's up to the commission members now to make their comments, and if it's okay with you, Mr. Hurdy, we can start with you.
Sure. My first comment is that the one that was been distributed, Tammy, the one you distributed to the commission members is very different than the one you just read.
There actually were two different ones.
And that was my fault when I was doing this on the computer. I wasn't finished with one, and I sent one ahead of time, and then I made the corrections. The one that Ms. Vach read, you should all have a copy underneath your hand.
It's not the one that I was given.
Okay.
The one I was given is very different.
But please blame me. That is not Ms. Vach. It's my fault.
Okay.
Yeah, I got another one in here, and I was running close again. I will take all responsibility
Yeah,
for
I'm
that.
sorry. I thought I had given you a copy of the other one also.
Do you have
Okay. That's fine.
Do you have what you need?
I haven't had a chance to see whether this one is word for word what the other one was. I know the other one was not, but
As you know, when
comments.
she said like the city of Vero Beach here compared to just Indian River County, which is what one of
I think
the
he
errors
has
that
it
you
now.
do.
He's good.
He
Okay.
has it.
Go right ahead, Mr. Huddy. Thank you.
and this is a draft that you've put together for a consideration for City Council, and at some point between meetings, I was contacted by the city clerk and asked if I would send her any recommendations that I might have for inclusion in this document. And I did not send her my thoughts. Quite frankly, I was still working on them today, but I do have a draft that I would like to consider for the commission to consider in conjunction with this one, and maybe I should do the same thing. Maybe I should just read this, and because some of the clauses overlap with yours, and then we can have a different point of view.
Right.
Big in your
Before you
part,
start,
she
can I
has
ask you
a question.
before
Sure.
you start? You mentioned, I'm just trying to get a gist of if you're talking about the memo of understanding or if you're talking about a draft resolution, or is it the same thing?
Well, I think the clauses are the same thing and would be included in the same thing.
Here's what the City Council had asked us to do: work on a draft of the resolution, then a memorandum of understanding, and that
Two
will
different documents.
two different documents, and we'll work on the memorandum of understanding after you folks give your input on this draft resolution.
Okay, and that's what I'm telling you, that I have things here listed that I think will have an impact on the draft resolution. And mine says where the high-speed rail has heard testimony from those who said they just don't want the train, and they further testified that they don't need a reason why, they just don't want it. And whereas we've had individuals opposed to the train that have given many reasons for not wanting the high-speed train, and their objections have been addressed. I understand that not adequately to some people's points of view, but addressed nonetheless. Where the City Council has directed the high-speed rail to study the issues, make recommendations to the Council for the debate and potential action. And the high-speed rail does declare and say, after due consideration, that we hereby find that those opposed say the high-speed train would slow traffic in the downtown section of Vero Beach, but the merchants in the downtown area have been asking for a way to slow traffic down for a long time, and this could be an answer to their prayers. This could be a traffic calming. Those opposed say that the vibration would destroy buildings and quality of life. But there are passenger trains. These are passenger trains that we're considering. They are lighter, and we've been instructed that the lighter, faster trains produce so little vibration and so little noise that just today we heard you don't even hear them coming. And yet no evidence has been presented which demonstrates that 100 years of service has caused any significant harm by vibration to Vero Beach structures. Those opposed say their number one objection is government loans, and they're the equivalent of taxpayer subsidies, and that All Aboard Florida has made application for such financing. I would argue that it's not within the purview of the City Council to direct private companies where they should or should not get financing. If I were to buy a house next door to yours and I go for VA financing, FHA financing, whatever, that's all public money as opposed to a conventional mortgage. I don't think that you have a legitimate objection to me buying that house because I went for the public financing. All Aboard has applied for the ability to sell bonds, and they thus reduce or eliminate the public financing, and it should not go unnoticed that All Aboard Florida's financing is not within the purview of Vero Beach authorities. Those opposed say there will be harm to wildlife, and we have been given the example, for an example, of the one-eyed scrub jay in Sebastian. But the railroad's been here for over 100 years without outcries, lawsuits, or evidence which demonstrates wildlife has been severely harmed or adversely impacted. Those opposed say local authorities should band together to oppose any high-speed rail use on the East Coast tracks. But, in my opinion, any interference or objections without credible evidence with valid reasons for their objections could result in legal liabilities construed under the legal principle of tortious interference. Therefore, I think the High-Speed Rail Commission should find that no compelling, credible evidence to either support or oppose the plan, All Aboard Florida, to utilize the tracks it owns, either directly or through parent companies, and that we find that All Aboard Florida should comply with the rules, the regulations, the speed limits, all of those things set forth by federal, state, local authorities, and further find that a stop on the Treasure Coast would be advantageous to residents that desire to utilize that service to Miami or Orlando, and further find and recommend that the Vero Beach City Council reject any proposal from All Aboard Florida which would increase the tax burden or increase the risk liability for the city of Vero Beach and its residents. And those are the things that I think should be included, but if you want to go down these clauses that you have one by one, I'd be happy to do that.
Mr. Moline, do you have anything to add?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd have to tell you I actually agree with the sentiment of Mr. Hetty's comments. I believe that they're well-founded. I believe that although we're here to advise the Commission on the positives and the negatives and take the public's comments and present those as well to the Commission, I believe that many of the things that have been suggested here within this resolution are well beyond the scope and reasonable position of what this committee should take. I have concerns regarding many of the things specifically in this resolution. As Mr. Pizzucello earlier mentioned, there are things that are fact and there are things that are opinion. And certainly this resolution suggests that there are many things that are fact in here by actually what the resolution in its substantive clauses mention. But there's the term may often used in these whereas clause, which would suggest that they are possibly more opinion than fact, as my fellow committee member pointed out to Mr. Webster's comments or in his disagreement with such. I believe, as Mr. Hetty pointed out, that it is a loan that is being utilized here, which may or may not be borne or burdened on the taxpayers, but similar to many loans of Small Business Administration, the Federal Housing Administration, the Veterans Department, that offer private citizens the utilization of government funds to further their dreams, whatever those dreams may be, of home ownership, successful businesses, and the like. That doesn't make those items borne by the taxpayers. And I think that is a misrepresentation of the scenario that goes on here. Furthermore, I think that the statement that we have been, and I will read it, continually misled by the true nature of the project, also falls short of an accurate statement. I believe that the statement that there will be increased railroad noise and railroad vibration also may shortfall. I read, the chairman sent me an article today by an organization that is an engineering firm located up in Sebastian, and I think the actual principal of that engineering firm mentioned that not only did the lighter rail cars likely not make additional railroad noise and railroad vibration, but as we've also been pointed out by Mr. Webster here today, the improved crossing and the improved grade of track may actually reduce the railroad noise and reduce the railroad vibrations that are put off by freight trains, independent of whether All Aboard Florida continues to move forward. Overall, my belief would be that Mr. Hetty's suggestion is probably more on point as to what this committee could do, or should do. But if we are going to move forward with this resolution, I would have some serious reservations.
Now, as far as the resolution itself, what we're doing with this, and I want to be real clear, is the council needs to hear from each commission member. And at the end of the day, they will make their minds up of what they want incorporated into the resolution. You know, there's a number of resolutions that I've sent them. This one we worked on. So it's actually, and I want to make that clear, it is up to the city council how they're going to draft and put their comments into this. But they have to hear, and it's good that Mr. Hetty wrote all his stuff out. Mr. Moline, you were pretty clear on your comments. So that will be part of the minutes that the city council can take a look at. So when they get ready to draft their resolution, they'll have the input from all of us.
Who drafted the one that you put before us, Ken?
This is parts, you know, from what I got from the city and also from other resolutions. There's things that I just wrote in there as far as what I picked up.
Who drafted it?
What do you mean, who drafted it?
Well, somebody put this document together, and I mean, just knowing the way you write, the way you speak, this was not drafted by you. Somebody did this. It looks like an attorney.
That's what I'm trying to make the point. It's from other resolutions that I put together to do the document, then for you folks to take a look at, and like your comments with your concerns, Mr. Moline with his concerns, the council can hear all of this. They've been looking at the resolutions that come in, and at our last meeting, the city council heard from citizens on both sides of the issue as far as, you know, their concerns.
I'm sorry that you misunderstood my question. I want to know the name of the lawyer that helped you draft this.
I don't have a lawyer. That's what I'm trying to explain to you.
You drafted.
I mean, as far as, you know, helping me, what I'm trying to explain to you is I sat down at the computer and pulled stuff together, and this is for you all to look at. You make your comments, what you want to see and what you don't want to see.
And there's no other input in this document other than yours. You did this 100%.
Reading other resolutions, and I want to be clear on that.
Pulling information from other resolutions.
Yeah, pulling information. So it's up to, again, back to your comments. You know, the council wants to hear from each one of us sitting here. What are your thoughts? And that's what you're doing now. You're giving your thoughts on what you're reading and what you want to add or delete.
Okay, and this was 100% your work. This wasn't discussed with somebody.
He's saying he took.
I was asking him, Ms. Chandler.
But you don't seem to listen to his answer, and then you ask him again and again. I think you have to take his answer at face value.
Okay. So,
okay. If you want to move on, I'm good.
That's fine. So, I just want to make sure that I understand completely. This is 100% your work. That's all.
Let's just move on. I gave you the answer.
Is that a yes or a no? It's a simple yes or no question.
Mr. Hetty, please, just move on.
Was this 100% your work?
Tell us what's on your mind.
What's on my mind is, was this 100% your work? Yes or no?
I explained to you.
I'll take that as a no.
Just go on with your thoughts. Tell us what else you want to see.
Maybe you can give me a yes or no, Penny. Do you think this was 100% his work or not?
I think what he did was he pulled up a number of resolutions that were already documented by other organizations, other communities, wherever you would get a resolution. Could have even been from the chamber. We do resolutions. And he took the pieces of those resolutions that he thought were appropriate to the document he was putting together. He pulled in that information and created this document for us to see.
Was the chamber help, Ken, with this?
Oh, my goodness, Brian. I'd like to make some comments.
Yes, ma'am. Go right ahead.
Okay, I'll move ahead.
I'll take that as a
I
yes.
think that it absolutely is a no.
Well, then why didn't you just say that?
Because
It's not a
why
hard
do you have to
question.
be- he answered your question several times. I think that in the document, my opinions would be that you take out the items 1, 2, 3, like the fourth whereas, which populated communities which are accustomed to or grew up with slower moving trains. I think in this particular instance, anybody who would be reading the resolution they don't care about what we grew up with or what the people here grew up with. I think that we have to stick with what's before us. At the bottom of page 1, if I'm clear on what I understood from presentations and information I read, I believe that the state of Florida had already determined in their long-range plan that they were going to put in a station in Orlando. It was part of their long-range transportation plan. I don't think that they're giving that. I think it's misleading in here when you mention all aboard. I don't think it's necessary to even put it in, really.
I think it's the intermodal facility that was already funded. I think
It
you're
was
correct.
already done, and I think that it makes it look like something different. So either rephrase that. You see what I'm saying? Either
rephrase or
rephrase it
remove.
or
Okay.
remove it. On page 2, I think at the top, whereas it indicates the number 32 within the county, I think we have to be specific with just what's in the city.
Just within the city, okay.
Or you could say 32 in the county and the number also in the city.
Give numbers for each.
The fourth paragraph down on page 2, I think it's important to keep saying that this is a proposed project, and it, instead of has not shown, does not show an economic benefit, but will cause a financial burden.
You're saying does not show. You take the word has out. Okay.
But will cause. And perhaps if the city council thinks it's appropriate, because the city council in the city of Vero Beach has always been very resolute on how they feel about the quality of life of the citizens within the city of Vero Beach. I think that quality of life could be added in there at the end, maintenance, comma, quality of life, and other costs. 1, 2, 3, 4. Fifth paragraph. I think all of those have to be rechecked. I think that the information's wrong in that paragraph. I think if you look in some of the tables and perhaps even name the table, if I'm not mistaken, I think I want to say it's 4.4.2 in the EIS. How many freight trains are being operated now? Currently operates up to 16. I think that number is high. But anyhow, just check all those numbers in there. In the next paragraph after that, where you mentioned 70 miles per hour through populated areas, in one of the tables in the EIS, it notes that 106.6 miles per hour through Indian River County for passenger. And I can find that table for you if you like.
Yes.
I think that the next two are so similar, I think that I would remove the longer paragraph in lieu of the shorter one.
Okay.
And especially when words are used like may hinder. I mean, that's an opinion.
Okay.
On the third page at the top, again, health, safety, quality of life, and general welfare, perhaps add quality of life in there.
On the top one?
On the top one. And then on the third paragraph down on the third page, perhaps just as where it says continually misled, I'm not sure I like that, but I would recommend perhaps that it indicate that in the draft environmental impact statement that that statement, which is what was given to the public, what was given to the governments for all of us to look at, does not include pertinent information and data that supports some of the findings. And in fact, some of that data is incorrect as it relates to Indian River County and the city of Vero Beach.
Okay.
Those are my comments.
Mr. Pedicelli?
Yeah. First of all, I'd like to, is this on? Yes. I would like to thank Mr. Daig, who has volunteered his services as chairperson, and I think you've done a great job. I think you have brought to the forefront many of the issues. We have sat here, and you have been leading this for many hours of testimony. I respect the fact that you gleaned from other documents pertinent facts and put them all together. And I also agree with Mrs. Chandler. I think she has wisely dotted every I and subtracted the dots and the I's where they needed to be subtracted. I'm not sure I can vote since I'm only an alternate, but if I could vote, I would vote with you two folks.
Actually, you can vote because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Filling in today.
Now,
Very good.
and what I was hoping is all of our, this actually could be for a vote, all the comments that we're doing today, because Ms. Bach is very good at doing the minutes, the city council will look at, number one, the resolution. Ms. Chandler had her input on it. Mr. Hetty had his input. Mr. Moline. They can take a look at all of that, and then they can come up and form their own resolution. We have given them a good template here, I think, to follow. And they wanted this this information needs to get to them before the November 4th meeting. Am I right, Madam Clerk? So that's what I'm hoping we can do. We can agree to move all the comments forward.
And one final comment, I apologize. I noticed that you did not include Secretary Fox in your people to send it to.
Okay.
And you may want to send it. He has been, I guess, a part of this process. I think it's Secretary Anthony Fox, who is the Secretary of the Department of Transportation.
Good. Now, if we're okay to move on, we'll move on to the memorandum of understanding unless another commissioner has some input.
Tammy can have that.
Well, input, what's your intentions to do with this document?
Send the document that we were just talking about to the city council along with your document, along with our comments. Comments
Okay, well
of all
then,
board members.
let's go back through then line by line on this document.
Okay.
The very first clause, this is, it's going to go through without stopping or serving the areas. At this point, there's no scheduled stop, but
She wants our copy back.
okay, there's no scheduled stop, but it's certainly arguable as to whether or not they serve the areas because of the reduced traffic on 95, and there's lots of things that you could argue. So I would remove the word serving. The current railroad tracks, is that the ownership, Florida East Coast Railroad, or is it Fortress, or I'm not real sure who owns, as a matter of law, who does own these things. If you're going to sign your name to who owns it, you ought to know who owns it. Wayne, do you know?
I can only tell you from history, it's the presumption is that it's Florida East Coast Railroad.
So you don't know?
I don't know. I've never done a title
well,
search.
If we don't know, I don't know that we should.
FECI, correct?
Probably. Yeah. But then again, that Florida East Coast Railroad is, I think, under them. So
Okay,
You know,
well,
all I know is
if you're
growing
going to put
up,
a
it was
clause in
always
that
the
you're going to
FEC.
agree to, you ought to at least know that what you're saying is accurate, and
Yeah.
that would include ownership.
Yeah.
They're going to travel, next one is they're going to travel at speeds of 110, that was through Indian River County, through Vero Beach. Is that the speed that they're projecting through City of Vero Beach? No, Penny says.
In the report, on a table in the DEIS, it says 106.6 miles an hour through most parts of Indian River County.
Okay.
And if I just may, they said through most parts. Now, when you go back and look at our meetings,
Actually, I'm wrong. It said
they
Indian
said
River
speeds
County.
up to 110.
Okay.
Now, Mr. Hetty actually brings up a good point about the speed. You know, if our community is concerned about the speed, if the railroad folk decide they need to go faster, you know, can they do that? You know, they're saying 106. It's in the EIS study. Is that my question would be, is that locked down by law? They only can go up to 106.6, or can they do up to 110 like they originally told us?
When they told us that, wasn't it because, and Matt's here, maybe, I think it was because that was as fast as they could go.
Okay.
But instead of maybe saying up to, why don't we just quote what it says in the EIS? That's the document they paid the consultants
There you
to
go.
do. So why don't we just say
Quote it.
we'll travel
Okay.
at 106.6 miles per hour through Indian River County and then you could put in parentheses, table, whatever, in the EIS.
The next one, Penny has asked to be removed. Following that, whereas at first, All Aboard Florida touted this as a private service, private company, and private money. Okay, they did do that, and it's understood that they intend to fund through a loan. It seems to me that their intention now is to float bonds, not do a loan. And again, if you're going to ask the city council to do something, I think you ought to ask the city council to do something that's accurate. And my understanding at this point is that's not accurate. That they're not going to finance this on a huge loan. They're going to finance it by selling bonds.
I asked the question when we heard that. I think it was on a Monday when we all saw that in the newspaper, and I did ask the question, were they withdrawing the application?
No, they're not withdrawing until they see
They're
what
not.
they have in terms of sales of bonds. But I think that their intention at this point is to sell bonds, not apply for the loan, or not carry through with the loan.
Would you agree to change how it's worded so that something about the RIF loan remains in there?
You reword it in any way you want, just as long as it's accurate. And
Now it is understood that All Aboard Florida is pursuing.
Yeah, I mean they're pursuing RIF loans and bonds. Okay, they are. And if they do, the next whereas is if they do, that's going to be the largest RIF loan. Is that that's accurate? I don't have any information that's different, but that's accurate. It's the largest loan ever.
I think that was reported by All Aboard Florida to this commission. I think it's reasonable to rely on that.
But does it matter?
I don't know if it matters.
Well, if it doesn't matter, it's no long in there. But it's not relevant. It probably shouldn't be in there. The $405 million, to categorize these as high-risk bonds, I don't know that you want to get into name-calling kind of thing. And they did sell bonds. They sold over 400 million of them, and they got 12%.
Brian, I would agree with you, and I would also then strike the word hefty.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I just circled that.
Going back to the paragraph you questioned, the one that talks about the significant portion being funded by the proposed RIF loan.
Yeah.
The large, I think you could take that out because in the next one, it talks about, if they secure this amount, which it's still kind of up in the air, and you
Okay.
could almost combine that with the
So-
following one where it talks about the bonds
Okay.
and just eliminate.
So eliminate the whereas is understood, the fund is significant. Eliminate that one, pull that one out.
And maybe combine the next two,
Okay.
based on what you're saying about, it is kind of up in the air.
Okay.
May I speak?
Go right ahead, Mr. Pacelli.
I think somewhere in there, the RIF loan must be maintained because it has never been taken off the table. They are going for the PABs, and it is my understanding that should they fall short in the PABs, that they're going to try and make up the difference with the RIF loans.
Right.
Yeah,
So
well, Penny's
somehow or other, we
suggestion
have
is
to
to
work
leave it
those
in.
two in together.
If you go 4 up from the bottom, the short one, Frank, that says, if all aboard secures the amount that it has requested in its RIF loan, if you keep that, and I think you'd have to then spell it all out, you can't just use that abbreviation again, then you can eliminate that larger paragraph above.
Well, I would put however, the RIF loans remain on the table and are a possibility, or some wording to that
Well,
effect.
Peggy's suggestion doesn't say that they're not on the table. She wants to include both the RIF loans and the
That's fine. That's
And the
fine.
bonds.
and the bonds.
Okay.
And then the last one on this page, Ms. Chandler has already asked that it be removed. Second page. On the second whereas clause, that City of Vero Beach, Indian River County will bear the maintenance cost of upgrading the railroad crossings. My understanding is that we're not bearing the cost of upgrading the crossings. Right? The upgrade of the crossings is all aboard Florida's dime.
Okay, I see, excuse me, bear the maintenance costs. Well, see, the maintenance costs, they're going to be upgrading their crossings, and there is going to be, or could be, an increase to the maintenance because of the upgrade. So that's
Okay, so bear the maintenance cost of the upgraded crossings? Of the upgraded crossings?
Upgrading.
Not going to bear the cost of upgrading them, but rather
Upgraded.
the upgraded. Okay. And the the next one, it goes back into the same thing. It's now clear that a significant portion of the financial burden of the proposed passenger rail would be borne by the taxpayers through the assistance of federal, state, and local governments. Where? How? Where are we bearing the cost if All Aboard Florida secures a loan and repays the loan? How are the taxpayers bearing a cost? I'm not sure. And if they sell bonds, how are we bearing the cost? I mean, I think that All Aboard Florida is making an effort that the taxpayers aren't bearing the cost, and I would agree that we should not bear the cost. But this says it's clear that we are. I don't think this is certainly not clear to me.
All right, so
Mr. Hetty?
Go ahead, Ms. Pacelli.
Would the word may, if it's interjected in that sentence, may be borne, would that suffice? Since the RIF loans are still on the table.
I think the fact is that it's a loan between the government and a private entity, and that's not the same thing as a grant or some sort of charitable handout. It's the same thing as if you have a veteran's loan on your house or a FHA loan on your house or a small business loan with your business.
Let me understand this. Since I pay federal income taxes, isn't that some of my money going to them?
Certainly. So then do you think that you should input on, or the City of Vero Beach should input on every small business loan that's issued here in the city?
No, but this has impact, greater impact, and it impacts everybody every day that crosses that railroad crossing.
It's a loan.
It's a loan. Mr. Pizzella, I would argue with you, even as an off-the-cuff, unsubstantiated fact, that the Small Business Administration loses more in small business loans, probably 10 times this amount. I mean, if that's your concern, I think it's not well-founded.
And actually, as far as the loan, the RIF loan, the bonds, how they're going to secure financing, I think what the City Council is looking for, because it's come to their ears a number of times, while they're out in general public, people are concerned if this company can't deliver, since it is a loan, it's a loan, it gets paid back. But if the company happens to default, people are worried, okay, they're saying that's my tax dollars. Now, actually, you all brought up some pretty good points. That paragraph needs to be worked out, because I think it can be worked out with clarity as far as, okay, what are you actually talking about? What are the taxpayers? What are you going to be picking up? And that needs to be made clear. I think that's what the City Council is going to be looking for.
I think we'd be better off taking that paragraph out.
Or turning it into a positive and just saying the City of Vero Beach believes that all costs should be incurred by Florida East Coast and all aboard.
I like that suggestion.
I like that.
And that's right, and that's kind of what I put in mind, that Vero Beach City Council reject any proposal from All Aboard Florida which increases the tax burden or increases the risk to the City of Vero Beach and its residents. But this clause, as it stands, about the loan and the cost to taxpayers, while I would agree that the federal government is pretty free with our money, I go back to the comments that are you then opposed to VA loans? Are you opposed to small business loans? If you're opposed to the RIF loans, you're opposed to public financing of public transportation. That's fine, but I don't know that belongs in this document.
Nor do I think it's the City Commission's job to micromanage how the government loans money one way or the other.
No, I would opt to pull that totally out.
I could agree with pulling it out, maybe replacing it with something like the City of Vero Beach believes no public dollars should be made available to Florida East Coast Industries or All Aboard Florida.
That's fine.
Could you speak up a little bit? I couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry. That I could agree with Brian to pull that paragraph completely and perhaps replace it with, whereas the City of Vero Beach believes no public dollars should be made available to Florida East Coast or All Aboard Florida for this project.
I love that statement.
Love that. That's great.
And I think that's what the taxpayers of this community are looking for. That's keeps it pretty tight.
That's right on the money.
Yes. Next.
The next one, Penny has suggested some changes that it has been determined that this project does not show an economic benefit and will cause a financial burden in the form of liability maintenance. It's pretty clear that it's going to cause a maintenance expense for the city residents, and I think if this entity is going to go through town and they're going to be making a bunch of money, that they ought to pay for the maintenance. But I think that there's long-standing agreements. Mr. O'Connor and Mr. Command have both talked to us numerous times about long-standing agreements between the federal, the state, and local government that put the responsibility of the maintenance of the equipment on the railroad entity in terms of they're the ones that perform the maintenance, but on the taxpayers in that we pay the cost. And I don't think that the city taxpayers should have additional cost incurred because of this project. I'm not convinced there's no economic benefit, but that's probably not my field of expertise either. So the next clause has been pulled. Ms. Chandler says the information's wrong, so that's been pulled. The next one has an incorrect speed limit that Ms. Chandler suggests we fix and correct.
And cite the EIS where they're talking about the speed. The section.
Right, you're going to correct it by putting, you're going to quote directly from the EIS?
That's correct.
That's fine.
That's correct.
And the next, whereas additional grade crossing closures and blockages hinder the emergency services. You know, we've had numerous presentations about emergency services. I know it's been a concern of Frank's, but if you look at the closure times and the chances of an ambulance getting stopped for more than 30 seconds, I'm just not sure that that's a huge problem. And a citizen told me, well, Brian, if it was you in the ambulance, it would be a problem. And, you know, if it were me in the ambulance, I would hope that the people that we have that ride in those ambulances are qualified, and I'm relatively sure that they are, to handle the situation for an additional 30 seconds until you get to the emergency room. So I'm not sure that I buy into that at all.
Wait, okay. That to me is actually a clause that I would hope the City Council would keep in there. A number of individuals have spoken to me just throughout our own community. There was an individual that was a lot older than I was. They had to sit and wait. They watched where an ambulance could not get through because it was blocked. Now, in this case, it was by freight, and it had to sit there till the freight train moves. Now, I don't want to sit here and go over the time frames and all this kind of stuff. It's important to people out in the community that the City Council addresses this. Now, if the City Council chooses not to address this situation concerning emergency vehicles, our police, our sheriff, that would be up to them. I hear what you're saying, Mr. Hetty. There's just a short delay. But then there's others, and again, it's been quite a few people. This is a big concern to them. They want to know how are their elected officials going to address this situation.
I still have the same concerns, and the next whereas clause is kind of a ditto of the one above there. It's the same issue, that there's public safety response times problem. So if you're going to put something in there, you probably ought to combine those two, since the second one is really kind of redundant. And the last on this page, where there will be no future stops within the city of Vero Beach. Well, I don't know that we know that. There certainly aren't any planned, and if you want to put that there's no planned stops.
That's actually a good idea.
But it says unless the plans are approved by
At this
Central
time.
Florida.
At this time.
Yeah, the problem with looking at another part of the sentence when the first part is stating something incorrect is that people never quote the entire sentence. So I'd correct the beginning of it where it says there will be no future stops, and just say that there's no stops planned.
Okay,
There are no future planned stops?
right.
Okay. Next.
Hold it.
Oh.
Does it make any difference in that last paragraph how the Expressway Authority is comprised?
Ms. Chandler, could you speak up a little bit? I can't hear
sorry.
you over here.
Does it make any difference in that last paragraph how the Expressway Authority is comprised? I'm just thinking of it as what the intent is. The intent is a resolution about.
What's the point?
Does it make any difference in a resolution to say that these future stops would have to be approved by the Central Florida Expressway Authority, which is comprised of elected officials representing the interests of Central Florida?
Seems to me it should be deleted since we just said
Okay,
at
yank
this
that one
time
out.
there are no
I think we
planned
take that
future
part
stops.
out.
Got it? Top of page 3. First priority, safety and quality of life has been added to that. And second, whereas, you know, the all-aboard proposed high-speed passenger rail will increase railroad vibrations. I don't know. I mean, we keep hearing that, geez, these things are fast and there's no vibrations.
It says in the EIS it will increase noise and vibrations. I can't remember where I read it.
No, you're
It's
right.
in there.
It does. It does.
With that being said, that would be another section of the DEIS where we need to cite the section.
Quote it directly.
Quote it directly.
Okay. But anyway, the increase vibrations, it says that it's going to cause irreparable harm to the city of Vero Beach. In what way? What's the irreparable harm that the passenger train vibration will cause to the city of Vero Beach?
That's actually when they're looking at that, when the harm, we would have to make a note here. They were talking about some of our historical sites as far as what harm, and you would have to cite as far as some facts, as far as, okay, you're saying harm, what kind of harm?
I still like that word may.
Okay. All right, I think that needs to be a little bit clearer.
Well, I'm not sure that may makes it clearer, but may certainly is more accurate.
Yeah.
But okay.
But yeah, for us to say that this is going, we're going to make an affirmative statement that this is going to cause harm. I think we ought to be able to back up any affirmative statement, and I don't know how you back that up because nobody seems to know what harm it's going to cause.
Exactly. So the word may fits in there perfectly,
So,
in my opinion.
Yeah, because that does save a lot. It may. Then as this thing rolls on out, with other comments coming in, with the specialists, they could show where there is going to be harm. Okay.
And maybe just harm, not irreparable.
Yeah.
well, I think if you're going to make an affirmative statement that it's going to do something, I think that you need to be able to back up what it is,
okay.
what harm it is.
May cause harm.
May cause
Yes, may
harm.
cause harm, I think, is
You're
perfect.
going to say may cause harm, then at least you're not exposing me or the city to liability.
All right.
The next one, Ms. Chandler, or no, not Ms. Chandler, but anyway, it's already been requested that the words "continually misled" be removed. Is that accurate?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Although I certainly do think that All Aboard Florida has done its fair share of misleading. As far as the true nature of the project, and I think the true nature of the project is they want to put high-speed rail in, and that's what they say they're doing. But I understand the tie to freight. I'm not sure that I buy into all of the concerns about that. But
Let me just interject real quick. In that paragraph, instead, being misled and all, I think if we change this paragraph and cite the EIS study, there's a number of things that have been left out. We're already hearing from our professional staff that there's things left out.
If you want to identify things left out of the EIS, then you're making an affirmative statement and you're identifying what it is that's fine.
That's what my suggestion was.
That's
Take
fine.
out continually misled and just put in the information that the EIS did not include pertinent information and data
Yes.
that supported some of the findings there.
Perfect.
I'm okay with that. Next.
Then it gets down to a resolution that says it's become necessary for the City Council of the City of Vero Beach to say in clear, unequivocal terms that it opposes. Jeez, really?
And that's
It
up to
opposes Florida's efforts to force this high-speed project through the City of Vero Beach while having the cost of the project borne by the taxpayers. It's just not true, that's all. It's just not accurate.
Okay, next.
Well, what are we going to do with that clause?
Do you want to delete all that and just
That's
go
fine.
into the now therefore?
That's fine. So yank that one out? Totally?
Ken?
Yes?
I would.
Okay.
Yeah?
I think you should leave it up to the attorney who's going to go over this,
Well, again, a lot of
if it's advantageous.
They're going to hear all
I
the
agree.
conversation on this, and then the city council, they will determine what they want in this resolution.
Well, that's why I would leave it in there and let them pull it.
Well, this
By
is
that
our
sug-
recommendation.
yeah, by that suggestion, we should just leave it all in and then just move on from here. I mean, if we're going to make a suggestion, let's make a suggestion.
Then my suggestion is to leave it in.
I would remove it.
Okay.
And I would remove it.
I would remove it.
Okay, it's out. Now, therefore, resolved that the whereas clauses are true and correct. I think as corrected, that's fairly accurate. They're hereby adopted. Section 2, the City Council of the City of Vero Beach emphatically opposes All Aboard Florida. You know, it's interesting. At the joint meeting, I asked a question of, the question was out there for any of the officials, whether they, or the public speakers, to identify with specificity what their number one complaint was. And a couple of the organizations that are opposed to All Aboard Florida refused to identify what they thought their number one was. Pilar Turner and the mayor both identified their number one opposition. And Pilar Turner said that her opposition existed, or her opposition came about only after finding out that All Aboard Florida was going to go for the loan. That prior to that, when she thought this was a public or a private company that was using private funds, she was in favor of it and she had no opposition. But her opposition came about when she found out about the RIF loan. So I think that you have council members, and Mr. Winger also identified his number one, but I think that you have council members that have identified that they're not emphatically opposed to All Aboard Florida, but rather they're opposed to the financing of All Aboard Florida. And I just don't know that City Council wants to be in a position of emphatically opposing All Aboard Florida.
I tend to agree with you, which may be strange, but I do.
Well, I don't know how strange
I was
that
going to
is.
say maybe didn't hear him
you.
correctly.
I'm just kidding.
Well, as the chairman pointed out, I think what we're attempting to do is to provide some language that would be considered by the city council in a draft form. So maybe the suggestion could be that if they adopt any or all of this language, that they then make a determination of support or opposition to
Well, if they want to, right, if they want to take a position to emphatically oppose or emphatically support, then they're going to take the position that they're going to take. But from this commission, I certainly don't want to sign on to a suggestion to the city council that they emphatically oppose All Aboard Florida. I would like to see them emphatically oppose any taxpayer cost that the city residents in Vero Beach shouldn't be handed additional tax bills, and I think they could emphatically oppose that. But just to oppose the notion of trains going through here and All Aboard going through here with the train, I just don't think that's a good move. And Frank agrees with that. So if we get a couple more, we can, or at least one more, we can remove Section 2.
But then what's the point of the entire document? I think it has to end somehow with a call to action.
I think just leave out the word emphatically.
I don't think we can suggest to them. I think that I think that probably what we could do here, since this is only a document that we are providing some input so that it can be the input to City Council, that perhaps we just put in a line there that Section 2 be replaced with the Council's determined support or opposition. Let them carry that ball. I don't think that we have to carry that ball.
I agree with that. Let them carry the ball, and they can go from there.
Right, they take our information, decide whether they want to oppose or support it.
They may not
Or
like
take
any
a
of
neutral
it.
position.
Well, that's true of every word in this document.
That's correct.
Right?
Yes.
We're doing what they requested. They wanted us to sit down and do exactly what we're doing, workshop this through and send it to them, and they'll decide.
Looks like we've done that, so I guess do we need a motion to make these comments into the record, Mr. Chairman, or how do you want to handle that?
The way you just phrased it is great, and I'll second that. Any discussion?
So you're going to pass this on to City Council with the changes and recommendations made by the commission here today.
As well as with your suggested
paperwork.
comments, as well as our verbal comments in opposition to this in general.
And you're going to include, okay.
It includes your document. And it also includes, if Ms. Chandler doesn't mind, her notes and all, which are very neat.
Handing them down.
Okay. Ms. Vaughn, would you call the roll?
Mr. Pizzuchelli?
Yes.
Mr. Hetty?
Yes.
Mrs. Chandler?
Yes.
Chairman Dake?
Yes. Did you get Mr. Moline?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Moline. I'm sorry.
Yeah, for the record, it's Moylan and yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you. Do you folks want to take a little bit of break?
No?
I do.
I have to go home and take some medicine.
Oh, you do?
Yes, I
okay.
do.
You want to keep going, or should we stop?
If you don't mind.
Okay, we'll keep going. Memorandum of Understanding, your thoughts. Ms. Chandler.
We've had so many meetings where we've included people from the county. I think that the only folks from a government entity that haven't been included have probably been the City of Sebastian people. I don't think I've attended a meeting here where they've been included. Or did we have Andrea Coy one day? I don't remember.
I don't remember.
Anyhow, I'm not sure that we need a formal memo of understanding, in that everyone has already agreed at the podium on the public record that everybody would be working together. And I'm just not sure that we need this document.
I would agree with those comments.
I agree.
Mr. Hetty?
Oh, there's 3 that want to throw it out. That solves that problem.
Do you have any comments? I'd hate to cheat.
No. I mean, there's no sense going down through each and every one and adding my comments to it. But if we just are not going to pass that along, that's fine. My suggestion for a memorandum of understanding is going to be included in the resolution, right?
Correct.
Okay. So there's no sense beating up on mine either then.
And perhaps that would be something that the city attorney and the city manager with council could make recommendations, make that determination at council. I just don't think that it's
Mr.
necessary.
City Manager, you address that, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would. I'm not so sure an MOU is necessary at this stage. We're really focusing in and using the Metropolitan Planning Commission as sort of our collector of information in Indian River County. The Indian River County Commission or Council has given the MPO the authority to use the consultants that have been hired by the county. And like I say, Monty and the folks from here are putting all that information together, and we'll distribute it through the staff, which is the advisors to the MPO, and the MPO obviously are made up of elected officials, which includes Sebastian, Indian River County, as well as the city of Vero Beach. So I think we have what you all would be doing here is something that I think is already being done.
Okay, thank you, Mr. City Manager. Any other business from the members? We're good, and I'm okay. We discussed this. I think we covered quite a bit today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Are we not setting a meeting in the future? I'm okay with that. You decide.
We have to check with her.
Great, well then let's adjourn.